So we're going to work on finding a common denominator, and we're going to do this visually. Now, one thing I want you to do is some practice on equivalent fractions. Again, you can use this app. Let's kind of look at how we get equivalent fractions and how we use multipliers to do this. And it's all about times and divide. We're not adding and subtracting the factors to get common denominators. Okay, so when we look at the common denominators, we're looking at getting the denominator or the bottom of the fractions the same. And again, we want to essentially do this so that we can get the same size pieces. Okay, because if we want to add and subtract, you cannot add and subtract pieces that are different. Okay, so we have a 1/3 piece and a 1/2 piece. They're different sizes. Okay, we cannot count them together, and adding and subtracting is counting. So how do we get these how do we get a common denominator here? Well, what we can do is we can do common divisions or common groupings. So if I have thirds here, I can do this into groups of 2. Okay, and I have halves here, and I can do this into groups of 3. If we do that, we get a common multiple, which gives us common divisions. Okay, so it's going to look like this. So I'm going to do this in groups of 2. By doing that, really what I'm doing is multiplying the ratio by 2. So I'm going to make the part 2 times bigger and the whole 2 times bigger. Here I'm going to get the common size pieces by doing this into groups of 3. Well, groups means multiplication, so I'm going to multiply the parts by 3 and the whole by 3. Okay, and to do that, when we do that, now I have divisions of 6. That becomes my common denominator in both cases. I can count up these things. So I have two groups of 2 6, which is same as 1/3. Here I have 3 6, which is same as 1/2. Okay, there's my common denominator. I'm just going to highlight that because there's my common denominator, 6 and 6. Okay, and now once I have the common size pieces, yeah, I can now add and subtract these. I can count these up. So my common denominator, I'm going to draw this out. Okay, so it's in parts of 6, and I have 2 6 plus 3 6 is going to equal 5 6. Okay, and notice that when we add these fractions together, we're counting the numerator. That's the number of pieces. The 6 just represent the size of pieces, and we don't change the size of pieces when we add them together. So there's our 5 6 solution. Okay, and again, we make sure that we're not adding denominators because the denominators don't change sizes. Okay, we don't change the shape or the size of the denominator when we add them together. Okay, so let's take a look at fifths. Fifths are a little bit harder to draw. I'm just going to try to estimate them the best I can here. Okay, and then I have tenths. Okay, so I'm going to have 3/5. So I have 3/5 here, and I have 3/10. Okay, so I have 3 out of 10 pieces here, and I want to add them together. Well, again, I can't really. Well, I can put them together. I can kind of estimate. If I put them together in my fraction bar, it's probably going to be something like this, and like this. Okay, but how are we going to express this as a fraction? Okay, because we need to have, well, what terms are we going to express this fraction by? Are we going to express this fraction by fifths or by tenths? Okay, well, again, to do this, we need a common size piece. Okay, so here this works out kind of nicely because I think when we look at this, if I do divisions of 2 for the fifths, I get the same size pieces as the tenths. And this is, again, I'm going to do groups of 2, so I'm multiplying by 2. And so I end up with it looking like this. So essentially this is going to look like 6/10 6 out of 10 plus, well, this is still 3 out of 10 because we're not going to change those divisions because we don't really need to. And we're going to end up with the same size pieces. So now I can count these together. I have 6 of these, 3 of the same thing. That means I have 9 of the same thing, which is the tenths pieces. So when I draw this in, okay, so I had my 3/5 here. That was expressed as 6/10. Here I had my, my 3/10 here. Okay, and then I have my, is that right? Oops, I think I might have just misdrawn that a little bit, but so I'll fix that. Okay, so I had my 3/10. Yeah, I think I did this correctly. My 3/10, and then I have my 1/10 here. Okay, so I have 6, 9, I have 9/10 as my final fraction. Again, I need to get a common denominator, a common size piece. I do that with groupings or dividing into common size pieces. Okay, and that's where my factors come in. And again, these factors are really important. You need to show those factors when you're doing your work. Okay, so we can try these ones as well. Okay, we want to find a common size denominator. So in this case here, I have a 1/4 fraction plus a 2/3 fraction. Okay, so I'm going to draw my 1/4 fraction in. Okay, so there's my 1/4 fraction. I'm going to draw a 2/3 fraction in here. Okay, so then when I add these together, what am I going to get? Well, again, I can't really add or count if I don't have the same size pieces. So I want to do my divisions, which means I'm going to divide this into groups of 3 to get 12ths. Okay, and I'm going to divide this into groups of 4 to get 12ths. Okay, so algebraically it shows up like this. I'm going to do groups of 3 here and here. Again, that gives me a common denominator, but it's an equivalent fraction. Here I'm going to do groups of 4, so I'm going to times by 4 and times by 4. So now I can re-express this as 3/12, which is same as 1/4. I'm going to express this as 8/12, which is same as 2/3. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that that looks a little bit more accurate there. Okay, and when I add these together, then I'm going to end up with 11/12. Okay, so when I do this, it's going to so I have 3/12 and 8/12 added together to give me my 11/12 solution. Okay, so there it is, my 11/12 solution. So again, we're going to do the same thing here. We have circles this time. Okay, we have 2/3. Okay, 2/3 and 1/6. I'm just going to shade in my 2/3 here. Okay, I'm going to shade in my 1/6 here. Okay, we need a common size piece. Well, it looks like the thirds can be divided up into common sized 1/6 pieces that I have here. So I do groups of 2. So that means I have 2/3 times 2 times 2 on the top and bottom. Okay, and that 2/3 now becomes 4/6. Plus the 1/6 doesn't change. So it's going to look like this. It's going to be 4/6 plus 1/6. And that's going to give me 5 out of 6 pieces. Okay, and we can see that 4 of those are from the yellow and 1 of those is from the blue. Okay, so there it is. Okay, so this one here, we're going to do this without we're not going to draw this one. The common denominator actually is going to be really big in this case, so it's going to be hard to draw, but the process is still the same. What is the common denominator? Okay, so I can use 140, I can just times by 10 times by 14, but we want to try to get the lowest common denominator. So in this case, the lowest common denominator is going to be 70. So I need a times by 5 to get the 70. I need a times by 5 to keep it balanced. I need a times by 7 here and a times by 7 here. Okay, so when I do that, I'm going to end up with 25 over 70 plus minus. So I'm going to minus a negative means I'm going to add. Okay, so I want to change that. Okay, that's less confusing. And then I can now add these together. I have the same size pieces, so I'm going to count 25 here, 21 here, so I get 46 1/70 pieces. Okay, so in your own words, okay, just try to pause this and do this in your own words. But how can we find a common denominator? How do we make a common denominator, and why do we need one? So I'll give you the answer, but I want you to pause it and try to think for yourself. How would you word this, put this into your own words? Okay, so how do we find a common denominator? We need to find common multiples. Okay, we need to use common multiples. Okay, so that's how we find a common denominator. Okay, how do we make a common denominator? We make common denominators with factors. Okay, so we make common denominators with factors. Okay, and then why do we need a common denominator? Well, we need the same size pieces to count. Okay, so we need same size pieces. Okay, that's what a denominator is. Okay, the denominator is same size pieces to count, which is add and subtract. Okay, so that's really important to make sure that you have this idea of why we do it, how we do it. So what I would like you to do is I'm going to show you a video of how to use this visual fractions using fraction circles. Okay, and I want you to do some practice with this as well. So I want you to do at least 5 examples of practice on your own to see how you get the same size piece and how the proportions help you get those same size pieces.